All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are in 2023 preview and prediction for the Ole Miss Rebels. Looking at this coaching staff, Lane Kiffin, a pretty modest mark of 23-13 through 3 years. John David Baker, Charlie Weiss Jr. will be the offensive play callers, while Pete Golding arrives from Alabama, spending the past 5 seasons in Tuscaloosa. And the Rebels here, primed for a run at the SEC West following an unconventional, interesting offseason. Look at this offense, Nick. They were 8th in yards per game, 496. You almost hit that 500-yard mark. The points per game mark for that many yards, I thought was pretty low, 33.2 points per contest. And I didn't watch every single Ole Miss game, so I'm not exactly what the proponent of that is, because I know Lane Kiffin was a little bit more decisive on his fourth down attempts this past year. I'm not sure how many kicking moves they had or how good they were really in the red zone. I think it was a combination of a little bit of everything this year for Ole Miss. Too much aggressiveness, maybe some kicking moves also. But overall, this is a team I thought should have put up a lot more points than they did. I think that's going to be something they certainly focus on this year. Looking at the transfer portal, they lost 7 players, added only 5, 2 at quarterback, 3 at pass catchers. The biggest note here that we want to talk about is going to be this quarterback battle, Nick. They picked up Spencer Sanders and Walker Howard late in the cycle to pair up with Jackson Dart, who arrived from USC a season ago. And this is just going to be an interesting dynamic. Dart last year, he really struggled to get the ball behind the linebackers. He's not, he wasn't, the ball wasn't high enough or either wasn't fast enough. 6'2", 220, some really good size. He was forced to use his legs in this offense and showcased aggressiveness when doing so. That's something that you're certainly going to have to do when playing in this Lane Kiffin offense. He loves to just throw lofting balls off his back foot. Showcase good timing on the inside breaking routes. No decision-making and accuracy were certainly iffy, though. He had a play against Kentucky where he blatantly gets fooled by the slot cornerback. This is a team, Nick, that was not really great throwing the football. Only 4 games of 250-plus passing yards. Only 2 at 300-plus. One of those was against Texas Tech, where Dart had 3 interceptions and almost threw the ball 50 times. Well, you've seen what Matt Corral did in his second year under Lane Kiffin. That is going to be the ceiling here with Jackson Dart, and that's why this QB battle is so interesting. Walker Howard, I don't think factors in here much, but Spencer Sanders, he brings a lot of experience and a pretty good fit to this offense also, Nick. So what's the dynamic here? What can we do to get this passing attack a little bit more? Because I don't think any of these guys right now at this moment in time are going to bring a Matt Corral type of effect, I don't think. But again, that ceiling is certainly out there for Dart, and that's going to be the expectation.
This is certainly a very interesting quarterback battle on Ole Miss's campus. Jackson Dart, good player. I like the completion percentage. That's where it really is good for me, right? 62% completion percentage, nearly 3,000 yards passing, but the TD to interception ratio, what worries me, 20 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, just not a good enough number. Dart is not too bad on the ground with 614 yards on the ground and 1. But he decision making what's concerned me. The accuracy is good, right? But he just has trouble reading routes sometimes, gets beat by the defense easily, like you said in that play against Kentucky. The 11 interceptions is a poor number, 6'2", 220. I think the size is fine. Overall, I think Dart has not hit his ceiling. I think there is potential for him to grow here this year and show a little more of that skill that we saw when he was originally at USC before transferring to Ole Miss. Obviously, Kiffin picked out he'd be the next Matt Corral. This past season, I think Spencer Sanders coming in was a very interesting move. Kind of shocked me when this happened. I didn't see him leaving Oklahoma State at all, and I really didn't know if he was a good fit here. I don't think he really works, like you said, in the RPO kind of setup that they run here at Ole Miss. I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for Sanders. He can throw on the run. I like the accuracy. Good player. Consistency is an issue, certainly. And then Walker Howard, I thought that was even more intriguing that he transferred here late in the cycle. I didn't think this made a whole lot of sense for him either, but he's got a nice frame, very talented quarterback. Was a high-ranking prospect in the past. So I think he's a good player as well. It's a very interesting sort of setup here with these 3 quarterbacks. I think Dart's got to be the guy to start for me right now. I think the incumbent gets the opportunity to start, but I think Sanders, it's intriguing. Sanders probably wouldn't transfer there if he knew he wasn't going to be the starter, so I think he thinks he's going to be the starter as well. This is a very interesting battle in Oxford. It really is a 3-horse race, even though Walker Howard is kind of falling behind here. Kiffin's going to pick the guy who gives him the best shot to win on every Saturday. I think right now that's Dart for me.
That's the key word you say with Sanders. He thinks he's going to be the starting quarterback. This is a guy who's entering, I believe, his 5th year, 4 years of starting for the Pokes. He's the best on the run. He can throw outside with accuracy, win on the move, a dual threat player. He's a good runner. He doesn't seem to, again, be that RPO fit, but a quarterback, legs are a big part of this offense. He ran a lot of pistol at Oklahoma State. Much like Dart, decision-making and consistency has really been a struggle for him. 40 career interceptions, 61% completion rate. Walker Howard, he was the 40th ranked prospect in the class of 2022. Transfers over from LSU, possesses consistent accuracy, even on the move with some good zip, carries the ball well, good feel for the offense. He's a confident player. I don't think he's going to be much of a factor this year. I want to say Sanders will be the starting quarterback, but I think I'm just going to have to go with Dart because, again, that ceiling in year 2, like Corral, very similar type players. I think it's too hard not to roll with. This offense does return 8 starters. They lose their second leading rusher. But they do, from a number standpoint, as a passing attack. I thought they were the exact same as in 2021, but they didn't possess the same threat to opponents vertically. And that's where you're going to insert a guy like Zachary Franklin, who arrives from UTSA. He was mainly an X receiver, has great route running, good lateral movement, great positioning on jump balls, great yards after catch and hands. He's a fearless playmaker. Doesn't exactly have great, game-breaking speed or dynamic change of direction. Doesn't always look to secure the ball either, so concentration needs to be upped a little bit. They pair him up with Trey Harris, 6'2", 204 from LA Tech, nearly 1,000 yards a season ago. They trusted him in jump ball situations as well. Also mainly an X receiver. Jordan Watkins really found better rhythm late in the year. Dayton Wade, he's only about 5'9", 175. As his stature suggests, he can be a dynamic player on screens, end arounds, or just with the deep ball. 4-star true freshman Aiden Williams, 6'3", 200, possesses a good catch radius, nice route running, impressive leaping ability. They also picked up from Memphis Caden Fricasord, 6'6", 250. He was a productive tight end for the Tigers. They also still have the athletic Michael Trigg. Overall, this is a good group with some depth, Nick. I think this passing attack, we're going to see a big boom this year because, again, I think Dart better, if not Sanders. He's going to throw his hat in the ring in one way or another. Franklin and Harrison, the portal, though, big-time adds for this team that would have really been in some trouble if they were not able to snag those talents.
Watkins and Wade are two solid pieces to return. They both average about 11 yards per catch. Three scores for Wade, 2 for Watkins. I like them a lot. I think both of them have unique skill sets. Trigg, good athlete, got to stay healthy. Only played in 7 games last year. Limited numbers for him, but he had 3 scores as well. The portal work here, I think, is good. They bring in Franklin, they bring in Harris. Those fill 2 needs they had to fill. Very talented pieces to get in. I think Franklin kind of lacks the speed, but he's a very good route runner, knows the playbook. I'm sure he's been studying it all offseason. Very talented player to bring in from UTSA. I think it's a great fit there. Harris as well from Louisiana Tech. Good player, can kind of play in that X, good with the jump balls. Like him a whole lot here. I think these 3 wide receivers are very talented.
And obviously, the crown jewel of this offense, Quinshad Judkins. This is a guy that caught my eye very early on last season. True freshman that got plenty of work from week 1, and then he took the reins of this offense. Massive production from him, 1,500 plus yards, 16 touchdowns. Zach Evans almost had 1,000 yards himself. He's in it apart, but this is a great rushing attack. USC's Bentley, a couple years ago at SMU, I believe he had 1,000 yards, double-figure touchdowns. He's going to get on the field with more healthiness this upcoming season. Third, in terms of running yards per game, over 250 of those per contest. Very impressive stuff. Judkins, a elite contact balance, runs like a bull, some really good acceleration in the open field. Great burst on those inside zone runs, gets plenty of goal line work also. This is a guy that I had a lot of fun watching all year long, especially in that Alabama game. He was able to bring the physicality to the Tide, Nick. He really gave them fits. He gave the entire SEC fits all year long. That 3-week span right there, 205 against A&M, 135 and 2 scores against the Tide, and then a losing effort against Arkansas. He had 200-plus yards on nearly 9 yards per attempt. And then the final 2 weeks of the year, he had 91 yards each in both of those games. So this is a guy that got plenty of work, and he was a dynamic playmaker for them all year long. I think this rushing attack, they're going to be just as good as they were a season ago with Judkins and Bentley, and we'll see what else happens with them also. But I think this is overall an offense that's going to have great balance.
Judkins put up incredible numbers as a true freshman. There's a reason why he racked up so many awards in the SEC last year. Dynamic runner. Love the size. I think it's very underrated, 5'11", 210. Great size. It's good with the balance. Runs like a bull, like you said. Good acceleration in the open field as well. He's got that good balance of strength and speed. He can run guys over, but he can also has that speed burst to break free. Like I said, there's a reason why he racked up awards last year. Player of the Week, SEC Freshman of the Year award, things like that. He won tons of awards last year for a reason. Very talented running back, and getting a guy back that's 1,500 yards on the ground is a huge get for a guy like Ole Miss and a guy like Kiffin, who's going to run sort of offense, is going to get the best out of Judkins again. Very talented back. Can't wait to see what he does this year.
Yeah, the Alabama native. He said the Crimson Tide did not recruit him, and that really put a chip on his shoulder. And this is a player that certainly showcased that a season ago, and I think he's going to continue to do great things. Look at this offensive line. Jaden Williams at left tackle, nearly 1,000 snaps. Had his moments in pass blocking, still allowed 26 pressures, really struggled as a run blocker. Eli Acker will step into that leg guard spot, wasn't much good in his own right. Caleb Warren at center, Jeremy James, the best of the trio on the interior, I'd say. Redshirt sophomore right tackle Micah Puttis, 6'7", 360. The staff is very hopeful of him. Starting 5 is kind of penciled in. The Washington transfer Victor Kearney, he could push for a spot in the starting lineup. Depth isn't all that great, but the starting 5 all have good experience and should see some progression after a much better 2022 season. And even with the offensive line struggles again, they still ran the ball incredibly well. But I think, offenses like this, the offensive line certainly gets overlooked, but their play, I think, late in the season, especially in the SEC West, could certainly be very important and something to monitor.
Certainly is important to make sure that your offensive line is working in these type of offenses. I think they get kind of underrated, like you said. They get a little bit ignored considering the style of offense they run here in Oxford. But I think this is a very talented offensive line that has potential. Can you step up and be involved? Micah Pettis, a big guy who played last year at right tackle, the youngest guy on the offensive line. Jaden Williams as well on the left side. Two young guys at left and right tackle who got good snaps last year. I think it's important to get your young guys in early. These two guys continue to step up and grow as on the offensive line and be guys that can be there for the next 2-3 years and be very talented to have on an offensive line.
Nick Brocker departs, but outside of that, they returned 4 of the 5 starters from last season. So I think top to bottom, this is an A offense for me. That offensive line's going to hold it back a little bit. And then, of course, the lack of rhythm through the air last year, it's certainly not what Lane Kiffin and this offense wants. So that's also going to pull it back to just an A. So top to bottom, this is going to be a great offense. I think they're going to push 38 points per game or so, because last year they were not very good in the red zone, and that's what kind of held them back. But I think they're going to see 500-plus yards, and you're going to see great numbers overall. And this offense is certainly going to be a tough out, as we expect under Lane Kiffin, even though this QB battle, I think, could be something that's pretty interesting, but I don't think it's going to be who is who kind of battle. Like, is this going to be the right decision? Is it going to be a bad one? I think either player will be a good decision under center, even though it is going to be something that's pretty interesting here with Lane Kiffin.
I agree. This is a very interesting offense. I think they should get above at least 36 to 38 points per game. 32 was just not quite enough for them. Like you said, red zone woes certainly played a role in that. Rolling the dice, going for a 4th down. It's something Kiffin's known for. So it's going to come with the territory. Nearly 500 yards per game is a crazy number. I think this offense can produce similar numbers like that again this year. Just even, regardless of who's at quarterback, when you have a guy like Judd, you're going to always be a threat and be able to break free and set those big gains up. So I think this is a very good offense. I think A is right where they belong. And you know what you're going to get with Lane Kiffin coaching. Obviously, it's going to be a dynamic offense. It's going to produce a lot of good stuff on the field.
Look at the Ole Miss defense. This is a unit that actually performed very well, I would say, under DJ Durkin in terms of progression. Of course, he departs. I don't think they were all that bad this season ago. There's still plenty of work to do for them to get pointed in that right direction. If you remember in 2020, they were just awful. In 21, they were pretty good. And now they're kind of back to square one this season after a pretty good year in 2022. They lost 15 players in the portal, added 9. Some very crucial assets. They only returned 5 starters, lose their top 4 tacklers. And Tavius Robinson, who's their top edge rusher from a season ago. This team had 35 sacks this past season, Nick. That's a number I think a lot of people are probably going to overlook. Look at this defensive line. J.J. Pegues, high motor, great havoc record, who makes, strong bear hugs in the hole. Some great burst for his size of 6'2", 315. Certainly lacks consistency in tackling. You're going to pair him up with Cedric Johnson, who I expected to be, a pretty good player a season ago. And I think he was good, but I think the expectations were not in line. Great feet, a freak athlete with some great straight line speed, a nice spin move with some of the good initial bursts. Needs more physicality and production from him, and I think you'll certainly get it. Isaac Akwu from James Madison, 6'3", 261. He was a great player the past 2 seasons as a run stopper and a pass rusher. Obviously makes a tough transition here, but I think he's going to be an impactful force regardless. Joshua Harris, 6'4", 325. This is a player we talked about numerous times last year when we previewed the Wolfpack. He was a great run stopper for NC State. Clearly, he's going to be a great, gap clogger with his size. Stephon Wynn, 6'3", 305. He was unexpectedly poor for Nebraska. I thought he'd be a good asset for them after being a solid run defender for a couple years for Alabama. Jared Ivey was pretty good for them at defensive end. Xavier Harris, 6'7", 335. Only a few snaps as a freshman, but that size is pretty ridiculous. I think overall, Nick, this is a good defensive line. 89th against the run a season ago, and that's obviously been a big knock on Lane Kiffin in his tenure. They cannot show up in the trenches on this side of the ball. The run defense should take some big strides this year. Pass rush shouldn't see much fall off, especially when we talk about Kahari Coleman in a minute. I think Johnson really needs to take over this year. But I think overall this is a really good defensive line, one that people are probably not going to give enough respect to until we finally kick off in September.
This is a good defensive line. This front 7 as a whole is solid. There is some nice production here. I think there are some guys who have produced in the past, and there's some solid size in this defensive line. I think Cedric Johnson is a solid piece to have. I think, you look at his stats, he limited snaps, but 32 total tackles, 4.5 tackles lost, 4 sacks for Johnson. I think that's a good piece to kind of have. J.J. Pegues as well, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, 26 total tackles. So they return some talent. They made some portal work. They brought in the guys they needed to. They grabbed some guys out of the portal. I think Johnson, like I said, Johnson's great. His size, fantastic, 6'3", 265. I love that a lot for him. I think they've made some good moves in the portal. They addressed the issue. They weren't bad getting after the quarterback last year. They had a lot of sacks, but they needed to fill that hole. They lost their top sack getter, and they go after it in the portal, and they really put that effort in, grab the pieces they need. I think this is smart from Lane Kiffin and co to get this going.
Now you look at Kahari Coleman, outside linebacker. This 4-2-5 defense allows him to kind of be flexible He has good burst, rangy run defender, showcased some good development as a pass rusher coming over from TCU. Good anticipation. Needs some better strength, and the size of 6'2", 220 isn't the most ideal. The return of Shanti Krishtank, who's really impressive in nearly 400 snaps. Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste from UCF. He had 100-plus tackles combined over the last 2 years. Monty Montgomery, over 1,100 career snaps at Louisville. He's been a strong pass rusher at times as well. Pretty consistent performer in coverage. Now, the biggest thing I want to talk about, though, Nick, is Pete Golding. Obviously he's a great recruiter, and that's certainly going to be a loss on that front for the Tide in a sense. But this was a guy who, ran a 3.4 at Alabama, and he underperformed. The defensive line production over the past 5 years has completely taken a nosedive with his guidance. I think he drastically underperformed in that role with Alabama. How is it going to be any better here for Ole Miss, who's taken a bit of a risk in Golding's making a pretty interesting move himself by leaving Alabama? We just talked about how good this talent is right here. I think they have a pretty good foundation. How is Golding going to get these guys to execute? Because at Alabama, I didn't think it was all that pretty.
I certainly agree. It was not great at Alabama. A lot of Alabama fans wanted Golding fired very quickly. I think Pete Golding, of the two coordinators this past season, I wanted him to stay over Bill O'Brien because Pete Golding does add that great sort of recruiting ability. Fantastic in recruiting, and when in this day and age in the portal where that's really such a dominant thing to be able to recruit, having a guy like Golding on your staff is really positive. I think Lane Kiffin, certainly that's why he went out and grabbed Pete Golding here, because the recruiting factor is fantastic. But like you said, in the trenches, Alabama has struggled. They've been struggling to get after the quarterback. The sack production outside of Will Anderson has really been weak for this past year, and obviously Will Anderson is just kind of a freak himself and an outlier. Overall, the production has not been great, and Alabama is putting in 5-star after 5-star, so Ole Miss is not going to have that sort of same raw talent. They'll be able to get some better players, but they're going to struggle to get that real raw talent in for now. I think Pete Golding's have to find a way to get the best out of these guys, and there is some nice raw talent here, but I just don't think Pete Golding was the right guy to make this move. It's a kind of a lateral move for me. I figured his next step would be a head coaching role somewhere in the group of 5. He ends up staying, in the SEC West, just moving to a different program, and a program that's below Alabama. So I don't know if the move makes a whole lot of sense. Golding, I said that earlier in the year. So I think it's definitely interesting to see if he can be able to coach these guys and get more production out of this defensive line that does have a lot of talent.
He's also got a secondary that in 2020 was one of the worst in college football. I believe they were dead last in passing yards per game, up to 55th this past year. This is certainly a focal point they've certainly improved on. Hasheem Young, he transferred over from Iowa State at the safety position. Very good length, fluid mover in space, strong hands to make plays on the ball. Some really good closing speed. Not exactly strong in either facet of coverage, not exactly a strong zone or a man guy, 5'10", 215, but a veteran playmaker nonetheless. Deantre Prince was the best cover corner for them, had 11 pass breakups this past year. Was also a really good run defender. Plenty of transfers occupy this cornerback room, most notably Deshaun Gady from North Texas, 2,100-plus snaps in 3 years with the Mean Green. He was an elite performer for them this past season. He had 13 pass breakups. Zamari Walton, some similar experience gained at Georgia Tech, coming off a pretty solid season in his own right, and I think that was a pretty good secondary for the Yellow Jackets a year ago. Jaden Cannady was a consistent performer for Tulane. He's going to battle UCF's Justin Hodges for that slot position. Trey Washington's going to compete with veteran Ladarius Tennyson for the safety spot next to Young. Both were quite solid players. When you talk about the front 6, I think it's pretty good. You talk about the secondary, I think it's even better because I just love what they were able to do in the portal. They're going to pack up Prince. They're going to pair up Prince with Gady. I think that's going to lead to some great playmaking. I think that this roster has been quietly built to a T. I like what they have on this side of the ball. I think this is going to be the best season for Ole Miss on defense in Lane Kiffin's tenure.
I think Prince is a very talented player at 39 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 11 pass breakups. Tennyson, 10 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him, 54 total tackles. Great against the run. Hasheem Young, 6 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss for him, and a half a sack, plus 2 pass breaks and a pick for him. So those 3 guys are very talented. Work was great. They grabbed a lot of great talent out of there. Gady's a very good player to have. Good transfer over there. Walton as well, coming over from Georgia Tech. Pretty solid season he had the past year. So I think this is a very good secondary, and overall, I think this is a good defense for Pete Golding's first year.
And even though all the positives I just labeled with this defense, I'm going to go with a modest grade of a B. The run defense needs to keep marching forward. Again, they do lose those top 4 tacklers. They don't exactly have an enforcer outside of Coleman. Tennyson, the 10 TFL, was nice. But Robinson, again, one of their top pass rushers, departs. In the middle of the defense, again, they don't really have that enforcer. That's something I really want to, see how they develop that. And it was collectively a strong effort. They had 17 different guys that at least recorded half a sack last year, and Robinson had 7 of those. So I definitely want to see some more individuals step up and take that next level this year, and I certainly think we'll see that, but it remains to be seen. I want to see actual proof of that before I jump the gun. B for me, but I definitely think the ceiling is high for this defense. I'm very excited for it, especially that front 6.
I agree. Very high ceiling for the front six. As long as Pete Golding can find a way to coach these guys up and get the raw talent out of them. There's a very good group. I like the secondary as well. There's a lot of talent there.
Look at the schedule preview and prediction. The offense has an interesting QB battle on its hands. But regardless, this offense should be a tough one to contain. But if Lane picks the wrong quarterback, the ceiling could certainly be capped. The run game will be great behind an offensive line that should see some great improvements this fall. Impressed by the potential the wide receiver core has, headlined by 2 transfers. They'll put up great production. The defense features a revamped D-line with some great upside to be much better versus the run. Pretty happy with the linebacking group. Some transfers in the secondary should really help this group blossom. 8-4 for me, Nick. At Alabama, they host LSU, and I have them losing 2 more road games at Auburn and at Georgia. These are all going to be winnable games for Ole Miss. I would love to see how they're going to perform against Georgia, especially if they do end up in the green on 3 of those losses beforehand. I think Ole Miss is going to be a very exciting team this year. I really think they can win the West. I definitely think that 8-4 is reasonable, especially who they're losing to. This is still the toughest conference on earth, Nick, so I don't want to jump the gun by any means. But I wouldn't be shocked one bit if this team ends up in Atlanta. I think that the offense is certainly going to produce a little bit more, and I think the defense is going to continue to march forward also. So very hopeful for this team's progression. We'll see what happens. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch every given Saturday, though.
I think 8-4 is a good spot for this team right now. I like this schedule. I think the non-conference is not tough. At Tulane is very interesting. Kind of a nice, fun game for this schedule. Tulane will not be as good as they were last year. It's still a nice little road trip there for Kiffin and co. It's just tough when you play in the SEC West, at Alabama, at Auburn, at Georgia. That is a tough 3-game slate, 3 very difficult places to play. So I think all 3 of those games losses, I think you can say that makes sense, and you can excuse those really at home to LSU. They might be able to pick off LSU. You never know if LSU has a tough season. If they lose early on to Florida State in the season, they kind of struggle to lose their focus. They could certainly lose to Ole Miss on September 30th. I think Ole Miss should be at 8-4. I think 8-4 will be a good season for them, get to a solid bowl game, and potentially pick that up to get a 9th win. I think this is a good team that Lane Kiffin has. He stayed. He stuck out in Oxford. He's here at least for now for another season. He's built this program so far. 8-4, 9 wins is certainly where this team is kind of going every year. 8-9 wins is kind of, it seems like the ceiling that Kiffin has met, but certainly Ole Miss fans would love to see him break through that ceiling, get to that 10-win total.
Now, that coveted win against Alabama seems to be getting closer and closer, Nick, but I don't think it's going to happen quite this year on the road. But it's probably going to happen when you least expect it. So if it happens there, this team's probably going to be top 5 nationally when it comes to a ranking of September 23rd. They pull off the upset. They're going to be set up to do some real damage if they can do that early on in the year. That'd be massive for the rest of the season for this program if they pull off that upset there in Tuscaloosa.
Program defining win if they were able to upset Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Tough to win in Tuscaloosa. Be a historic win for Lane Kiffin to get that win over Nick Saban he's been so searching for. Last year seemed like it was his best opportunity. Came down to the wire, the final play of the game. Alabama broke that pass up to end the game. Look, Kiffin will eventually beat Nick Saban, right? It's going to happen. I just don't know when. I don't think it's going to be this year, but certainly if it's going to happen, it could happen on any given Saturday. And this year, you never know.
It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. Always fun to talk about the Rebels.
Absolutely. Love talking about the SEC West.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.